Up and away, Webb! Shazam!
I have crippling depression.
2 to the 1, from the 1 to the 3. I like good pussy and I like good trees. Smoke so much weed you wouldn't believe. And I get more ass than a toilet seat. 3 to the 1, from the 1.
Shazam is an interesting movie. Technically speaking, it's one of the best reviewed and most well-received DCEU movies, barely getting beat out by Wonder Woman. And even though on the surface it doesn't seem to be a major hit at the box office, it actually made 6 times its budget, which was somewhere around $62 million, which is relatively cheap these days for a superhero film, so it's technically a financial success, and a sequel is in the works. So financially it was a hit, critically and audience reception is one of the highest of any DCEU movie, but here's the interesting thing that I noticed about this movie. Amongst DC fans, this movie seems to be either loved or hated, and I want to explore why I think that is. And to answer the question, is Shazam overhated? I asked you guys what you thought so I can get an idea of what people think and where they stand. But first, let me briefly go over what I think about the movie, so that you guys know where I stand.
I want a bitch that sit in the crib with no panties on. Knows that she can, but she won't say.
Now, I really like Shazam, and like someone pointed out on Twitter, it aged pretty well, and now it feels like a classic Christmas movie that you can watch every year. I think David S. Sandberg was an interesting choice to direct because he's known for doing Lights Out and Annabelle Creation, as well as dozens of short horror films. But James Wan and Sam Raimi showed us that the horror directors seem to work really well in the superhero genre, and Shazam is another example of that. I think the movie is entertaining and pretty funny, although some of the jokes do last a little bit too long and they almost get ruined, but that's only a few times. Overall, the movie is pretty funny. Every time I watch it, I think it's a blast. I also really like the theme of family and how it's more than who you're related to. It's not all in your face like the Fast and Furious movies, and instead it's done very well. For example, the villain, Dr. Savannah, knows his family but isn't close to them at all, and he sees them as a weakness. While on the flip side, Billy doesn't know who his family is but actively searches for it, before realizing family is more than blood or who you're related to. I mean, it's pretty simple but very effective. And probably one of the most entertaining aspects of this movie is watching Billy just have fun and experiment with his powers, as well as doing things as an adult that he can't do as a kid. Those are some of my favorite moments, and those scenes are really what make the movie so much fun. Although one of my personal favorite scenes is when Billy finally meets his mother after looking for her, and he goes in for the hug and she stops him. That just fucking hurts. And then we see the same flashback from the beginning of the movie when Billy and his mother got separated, but this time it's presented different than before. It's not as bright and colorful, and the lines are the same but have a different delivery, showing us what really happened wasn't as bright and happy as Billy remembered. Then he gives her the compass, the same one she gave him as a kid, and she doesn't remember it or understand its significance. I've actually had that same interaction with a family member, so for me, that really hit close. Yeah, it's some pretty sad shit. Also, I really like the few scenes where we see Sandberg pull from his horror roots. Mainly when the Sins kill everybody in the meeting. That shit was awesome. The only real problem I have with this movie is the third act has a lot going on with the family fighting off the Sins and Billy fighting Savannah. It feels all over the place in the final battle. Also, Shazam's suit kinda looks like ass. Has way too much padding. Although it looks like they're gonna fix that in the sequel, so that's good. And there's some spotty CGI here and there, mainly in the battles, but I guess it's due to having a smaller budget. But it's not really a big deal and I can look past it. Also, there are a few times where I feel like Billy as a kid and Billy when he's Shazam don't really act like the same person. When Billy is a kid, he seems more down, brooding, and ironically more mature. But yet when he's an adult as Shazam, he acts more childish and much more goofy. Although I guess I can write most of that off as him just being really excited about the superpowers and being an adult and doing whatever he wants to do now. But other than those few things, I really like this movie. I saw it in theaters and had a blast. I think I've watched it 3 or 4 more times since I got it on DVD. And I'm definitely looking forward to the sequel. And not to mention that Black Adam crossover. Now with my thoughts on the movie out of the way, I want to go ahead and discuss some of the reasons why I think a lot of DC fans don't like this movie. And although some of these can also apply to people who aren't DC fans, it could be some reasons why some people in general just don't like it. And I'll point out that these are the stuff that I see people say online. So these are just observations that I've had. And of course, these reasons don't apply to everyone. These are just the reasons I noticed amongst different groups of fans on why they don't like the movie, giving this movie a bad rap in some circles. So without further ado, let's discuss some of these.
I've been to the motherfucking mountaintop. Heard motherfuckers talk, seen them drop.
So these first couple reasons I'm just going to bundle together because they're all related. We have a shift in tone, MCU imitation, and trying too hard to be funny. Now clearly this movie is meant to be more lighthearted, fun, and basically a comedy. And we compare it to movies like Batman vs Superman, Man of Steel, and the first Wonder Woman. You could tell it's pretty different. And we saw DC and Warner Bros. Start to shift the tone with 2017's Justice League and forcing that movie to be basically an Avengers knockoff. But even in Aquaman that came out before Shazam, Shazam, you can see them trying to force in some jokes, trying to make it more funny. Although with Shazam, it feels like it's trying to cater to the MCU audience, and many fans think this movie feels too much like an MCU movie, which causes some fans not to like it because to them it feels like they're just imitating what the MCU is doing. Personally, I think this movie has an identity of its own to really stand out from the other DC movies and the MCU movies that people compare it to. But it's definitely a shift in tone from the previous DCEU movies, and it's definitely going for a different vibe and trying to be a comedy, which is also another reason why some people don't like it, because they think it's not really that funny, but it tries really hard to be funny, so to them it comes off as cheesy, goofy, and sometimes cringe. Now these first three reasons can not only apply to DC fans, but for people who don't really like the movie in general, but I've mainly been seeing it from fans of the DCEU. Now this next one is definitely the biggest one I've seen, and that's Zachary Levi's comments about the Snyder Cut. So before the Snyder Cut was officially announced, Zachary Levi was asked about it at a panel, and he used this opportunity to mock fans who wanted the Snyder Cut, of course saying that it doesn't exist, and that people should focus on other things.
I mean, I'm still waiting for the Snyder Cut to be released.
Yeah?
No, I'm kidding. It doesn't exist.
So naturally, a lot of fans were not happy about that. And I've heard people say that it's only Snyder fans who got upset about his comments, which of course the majority of people who were upset were Snyder fans. But I've talked to and seen many other people who aren't big fans of Snyder think what he said was pretty disrespectful, and it changed their perception of him, which in turn can affect how you view a movie that he stars in. So there are a group of fans who don't really like the movie because of what he said, or maybe they're more critical of the movie because of his comments. And I remember back in 2019, some people were actually upset by the end credit scene where Superman shows up, but you actually don't see his face because it's not actually Henry Cavill. It's instead his stunt double. And some fans, yes, mainly Snyder fans, saw this as DC and Warner Brothers just trying to cut off ties to Snyder completely, because at this point, Henry Cavill's status as Superman was kind of unknown. So when some people saw this, they kind of got upset because it felt like they're trying to completely ignore the first part of the DCEU, mainly Snyder's movies. And even though I've seen many Snyder fans not like Shazam, I've also seen many more who do. Hell, I do. But regardless, Zachary Levi's comments definitely made a lot of people feel a certain way. And even though I understand why some people will be upset, I feel like they shouldn't let them affect how they see the movie. Now this last one is probably the biggest one I've seen, and that's when you watch reviews or read reviews and you hear people say, finally a good DC movie. I saw a lot of reviews online when this movie came out, and a lot of them were saying that this is when DC finally got good, or this is when DC finally got it right. And for fans of the early DCEU movies like myself, constantly hearing that can make you grow bitter towards Shazam, because it's getting endless praise because it's so different from the other ones. And you mix that with the points from earlier, it can make you hate the movie, or at least make you critique it more and enjoy it less. So reviews that belittle the previous DC movies while they're praising this one can cause people to be more critical and become really bitter towards it. And for a short time, I saw a big wave of backlash after this movie came out because a bunch of reviewers said it's the best DC movie. I feel like recently the hate for this movie has died down, and people that I've personally seen not like it have come to enjoy it now. So do I think Shazam is overhated? Yes, for a while I believe it was. There are some really valid criticisms towards this movie, and for some people, it's just not their cup of tea and they thought it was just okay. But most of the reasons I've seen people for not liking this movie all stem from the ones that I listed in this video. They think it's trying to copy the MCU, trying too hard to be funny, they don't like the shift in tone, they don't like Zachary Levi or what he said. They think it's overrated because all the reviewers are sucking the movie off saying it's the best DC movie. So for a while, amongst different groups of fans, there was this hate for Shazam. But I think it's a very fun, solid movie, and I thought people were just being a little bit too harsh on it. But at the same time, I do understand how it could also be overrated because of the amount of endless praise it got when it released, and reviewers calling it the best DC movie. But that's up for each person to decide. And that's gonna do it for the video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it. And leave a comment, let me know what you think about Shazam. Do you think it's overrated? Do you think for a while it was overhated by fans? Leave a comment and let me know. Also, I made an Instagram account, so go ahead and follow that if you want, or don't. I don't care. There's also a link to my Twitter down below too. Alright, that's it. Get out of my face.
Alex, what the fuck are you doing? Did you just come in your sister? Tiffany's not on birth control.
Lexi, do you ever shut the fuck up? They're just kids.